The number of landlords selling their properties has doubled. In fact, nearly 12% of all properties that were listed on the market for sale between July and October in 2024 were all landlords selling their properties. Now, there are three main reasons why landlords are selling their properties, and I'm going to go through those with you in 1 second, but there is an alternative, which I'll tell you about at the end of that, just to see if there's a better option for any landlord that feels like the only option is to sell. Now, the first reason why a lot of landlords are selling are mortgage rates. Mortgage rates have gone sky high over the last couple of years. In fact, it wasn't that long ago that landlords were borrowing mortgages at a rate of around 2 to 3%. Now, that average buy-to-let mortgage is somewhere in the region of 5 to 7%, and in some cases more, especially if you own those properties as a limited company. The chances are you're paying a slightly higher rate. Now, you can get lower rates, of course you can, but the fees go up or the penalties go up. So it's all relative, but there are so many landlords right now that are coming up to a remortgage because they're at the end of their 2-year fixed rate or their 5-year fixed rate, and they're looking at the new rates that are on offer, and it doesn't work. The rent isn't high enough. And yes, rents have been really going up quite quickly, but there's only so high you can put rents before tenants just can't afford it. Tenants also have to pass affordability for the rent that you're trying to charge. So there are so many landlords right now that are thinking there's not enough rent to cover the mortgage payment, especially when you add in insurances, maintenance, compliance, management, every single other thing that landlords have to pay out for. There's just not enough money on the table. So that is forcing a lot of landlords to sell their properties before the fixed rate comes to an end. Number two is regulations, obligations, compliance, all of the red tape that landlords now have to go through just to be a landlord and to have a rental property and to be a housing provider. There are so many different pieces of legislation and regulations and so many different processes now that landlords have to follow. If you go back 15 years, maybe even a little bit less, being a landlord was pretty simple. You just collect the rent every month and you look after the tenant, that's fine. But now you've really got to follow every single protocol, every single procedure to the T. It's crazy. In fact, there are something like 176 different pieces of legislation that landlords have to follow. And nowadays, if you don't know all those pieces of legislation, you're going to be in trouble, because the councils are setting up task forces. They are piling in investment into catching landlords and finding reasons to charge landlords massive penalties, 30 grand, it's crazy. All of those new rules and regulations and all of the changes to existing rules and regulations are causing a lot of landlords to sell their properties. They've had enough. And the third thing is tenants. There are so many more bad tenants now than there was, and playing the system so that they don't have to pay their rent, and then they can stay in the property for a year, not pay any rent, and then leave. And it's all down to the landlord to cover that massive cost. So many tenants are doing that now. And I also see that your regular private landlord who just wants to let their property to a tenant as normal is really suffering, especially if they don't have a managing agent helping them. Bad tenants now not paying their rent, not looking after the property is a real factor in landlords deciding, I've had enough, I just want to sell and get out of being a landlord. So I really do sympathise with a lot of landlords. Now, I must also say that there are also a lot of good tenants. And in fact, the majority of tenants are good. And yes, being a landlord comes with a risk of picking or ending up with a bad tenant. It's nothing that you've done wrong necessarily. as long as you've done the correct checks and you've done your due diligence and you've done the right referencing and vetting, as long as you've done all that, then you should, in theory, end up with a good tenant. But there is always that risk. And that's property investing. That's any investing. That's being a landlord. That is part of it. But there are so many more tenants now that are trying to really screw landlords over. I did that video a little while ago about the tenant that committed pretty serious fraud in order to move into a property and then not pay rent for a year. Go and check that video out, actually. It's on YouTube. But it is a serious problem and it's really affecting landlords. And those 3 reasons alone are causing so many landlords to exit from their properties and sell their properties. And I can't say I blame them. But there is a solution. There are solutions, in fact, to all of those 3 things. And I'd love to know what your thoughts are here. Why would you sell a property, or why do you think so many landlords are selling their properties? Now, the solutions to those 3 things. Number 1, there's a pretty simple solution to mortgage. Now, if you're a portfolio landlord, you might want to consider speaking to a mortgage advisor about a portfolio mortgage. Now, I've got a portfolio mortgage on a load of my properties and it worked out really well for me. So it's a really good idea to just have a chat with a mortgage advisor to see what the options are there. You might be able to save a load of money. You might be able to do something better with the mortgages that you've got, or there are other options there. Now, I don't want to steal the thunder of a good mortgage advisor, but speak to my mortgage advisor. All you've got to do is just email me. It's tom@soanegroup.co.uk, or contact me through my Facebook page or WhatsApp me or whatever it might be. Just get in contact with me and I'll just connect you by email to my mortgage advisor and have a chat. See what options there are for your portfolio. And it's the same if you just have one property. There are options that you might not know about, especially if you're trying to find your own mortgage solutions. A good mortgage advisor will find you solutions that you don't have access to. Better rates, better mortgages, better facilities, better solutions all round. And the second thing is, with all of the legislation that landlords now have to follow. Now, a lot of landlords think that a managing agent, for an example, is just a cost. It's just money paying out to somebody else, things that you can do yourself. But it's so much more than that. First of all, a good letting agent will pay for themselves. They'll pay for themselves because they will bring you in more rent. They'll bring you in more reliable rent. They will save you so much time and hassle and risk. Because you right now, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, are risking the council identifying you as a private unmanaged landlord and going after you. And they will go to the property, because they're allowed to just go to the property and carry out an assessment and find something wrong with your property. And the reason why they want to do that is because now that is revenue for the council. Now the council can keep all the money they charge you, and that means it's now a revenue stream. So they're going to come to your property and they're going to find something they can charge you for and make some money from you. But a good letting agent will, first of all, protect you from all that risk. Second of all, they'll make sure that your rent is always at the optimum level. And I use the term optimum on purpose. It's not just about ramping it up as high as you can so that the tenants go into arrears and they can't afford the rent. Well, that doesn't solve anything. But a good letting agent will keep that rent at the right level. Make sure it's paid month in, month out. And in fact, my letting agency can also give you a guaranteed rent, meaning even if the tenant doesn't pay, even if the property's empty, you will still get paid your rent. And lastly, the third thing is tenants. And with tenants, there is a solution. My letting agency now run what we call a landlord rescue service. What that means is, if you have a bad tenant and you need a solution, it doesn't have to be eviction, or it can be eviction, but you just need advice on how you can resolve a situation and conclude a situation, but do it properly and compliantly and legally and all those things, then that's what the Landlord Rescue Service is. It's a completely free service for all landlords in the PO and SO postcode. All you've got to do is get in contact, send me an email, tell me what the problem is, and I will either give you the advice that you need in order to resolve the situation, or I will point you in the right direction, or I will give you the resources that you need. Maybe it's a document, maybe it's a template, maybe it's something. I will give that to you. Again, all you need to do is email me. I will answer every single email I get. It's tom@soanegroup.co.uk. I'll also put a link below so you can click that, contact me through that. Ask any question you want. I'll answer every single question I can, or I'll point you in the right direction. It's a free service, so you might as well take advantage of it. And don't feel like the only choice is to sell. So if you do have a property that you know you need to sell, before you've gone through the options that I've just been through, spoken to my mortgage advisor, spoken to my lettings agency, spoken to my landlord rescue service, if you've done all that and you need to sell, then please speak to my landlord to landlord property sales service. And also don't forget to let me know why you think landlords are selling and why you're selling if you are one of those landlords. Take care.